What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Property Auction Hunters. And today we are joined by special guest, Kazi. Kazi, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you always see Kazi on the other end of these where he's doing his podcast. But today we thought we'll have Kazi as a special guest. We've obviously got Jay, PR, and myself, Safe. So today, the kind of whole talk of today is going to be about the political situation we've got going on. So we've obviously got the general election going on the 4th of July. For context, it's June at the minute when we're filming this. And so we just really want to understand, how does that impact property investors, developers, traders? And the reality of that is, how is that going to impact the wider economy, whether it's going to impact other institutional investors, etc. So, yeah, I mean, Kazi, I know you do development. Obviously, you then hold some stuff in terms of from an investment point of view. So you do a bit of flipping, a bit of investment. Is this even on your radar or your team's radar in terms of a bit of a risk for you guys to be thinking about? Or are you guys kind of like business as usual at the minute?
I think when it comes to property, I'm always buying. Whenever anyone asks me, like, first question people ask if they know you're in property, right? It's now a good time to buy.
Yeah.
And it's always relative to, okay, what's your strategy? And I think it's always a good time to buy, but it's how you pivot and how you navigate the waves of the market effectively. And you look at what's coming in the upcoming, elections, depending on the way they go and people's specific manifestos, and you just kind of pivot accordingly.
Does Labour scare you? Because it looks like it's pretty set for Labour, but does that scare you?
Yeah, I think obviously, I think we'll go on to obviously some of their sort of key points in terms of policy, particularly around things, like rent control, and other areas where you look at and say how. I think what almost doesn't scare me is you look at things, you say, how is that feasible? Like, with looking sort of more holistically at the market. Yeah, it sounds like a good, political standpoint. Say, okay, look, this is what we're going to do. But in reality, I think execution, a lot of the things that they want to do just don't really seem viable. That being said, we went through Brexit. So, we have to kind of balance.
So you think they might do a few U-turns on things because the reality is that the market just can't support it, supply and demand, etc.
I think that's literally it. When you look at things like, them wanting to effectively, sort of suppress the buy to let market effectively, where it's already at a point where people are exiting. If you don't have the level of supply, intrinsically, that's going to have longer term issues when it comes to the market as a whole, which is going to affect the wider populace, which is who they're doing this for.
Homelessness and lack of stock. Before we go off on a tangent with Jay, PR, do you want to just tell us? So, what are these manifestos? We've got Labour, we've got Conservative, we've got Lib Dem, we've got quite a lot of different parties. So, do you have any summaries of this? Can you kind of summarize them?
So the key points are the same as for every election. All the parties want to build 300,000 properties a year.
We've been hearing this for ages, but
and they want to obviously get more more brownfield sites in use, and simplify planning process and fund planning process by getting the tax on foreign buyers and foreign people who buy property. So basically, the manifestos are very much similar. I think the pressures on the market are very different, because right now we've got the rental crisis, the prices of properties to rent are very high, and that's reflective of the mortgage prices that the landlords need to pay, and all the costs that are involved with renovating properties and everything else. So there's a lot of pressures on that, and obviously Labour wants to be seen as a party that will give a relief to tenants in some sort. And
the party of the people, as they say.
The party of the people, yeah. But again, they say this before election, and like Kazi says, I don't think practically it's possible to make those things as easy as Labour is saying this. And the same with building 300,000 houses or properties every year. Every party's been saying that. No party come close to it. I think the number right now is about 70 to 80,000 a year of new properties being built, and that's not even
I think it's
close.
Practically impossible to build 300,000 houses a year from a build cost point of view, because you're not looking at just London, right? You're looking at outside of London. That's where a lot of the build's going to be. It's build costs, land values. You've got loads of areas with negative land values, and then planning constraints on top of that. So I think it's great to have in your manifesto, but there's never going to be a reality that comes from that.
I think what people want to see is more of an actual plan. I personally would much rather see a plan to build 100,000 homes with this is where we plan to build them, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is what the impact that's going to have on the wider economy. And I think plans that are actionable, I think people are waking up to like sensationalized topics where we just say 300,000. I think they actually want to see some things that are realistically deliverable.
Jay, your chance to go off on a tangent.
Thank you very much. Well, probably won't take it too much onto a tangent, but these things are always things that are discussed, right? And Kazi made a really good point there. It's what is deliverable. And these are things that no one really looks at. As you say, it's all buzzwords, it's all hype. But we haven't got energy security for a start. So even if they built the new homes, there is a chance that if they don't find alternative energy solutions, because they're not re-signing new oil deals in the North Sea fields, they're not. So even if you built the homes, how are you going to power them? Right.
Yeah.
So it needs to be a government that's actually looking at this 360, not looking at we're the party that stops feeding, giving kids school meals for free, right? The Conservatives, we're the people of the party of the people, the Labour that are going to make sure everyone's fair and equal. It just, unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. What needs to happen is that someone comes forward and says, this is how we're going to fix things. They get broke. Everything breaks. Even if it's just wear and tear, the country goes through wear and tear. And in the last 10 years, 15 years, probably more wear and tear than the last 45 years, before you get to the fallout of World War II. But the real thing that you're looking at here for the government and for property specifically is not just that Labour are going to come in and give tenants loads of rights and then restrict landlords and do all these different types of things. That's fear-mongering. There's no way that's going to work, because what they need first and foremost is A, they need votes, and then B, they need taxes. Landlords are excellent taxpayers, the SME ones at least, the ones that are poor taxpayers are the big international, multinational, if you see Lloyds Bank and Tesco's buying up swathes of property and building swathes of property, they won't be paying the same amount of tax as you or me. Yeah. It just won't happen. So if you're running a government, you have to find out who's going to benefit from the policies that you put out. And unfortunately, the current government don't have a clue. They've just fallen so far by the wayside. And the other governments that are looking to come in have just been sitting there and watching. Yeah. Not a single PM question time I've watched in the last 5 years has the contrary government turned around and actually held the existing government to account.
This is like a relay marathon where you're basically having to run and pass the baton to someone else, and someone pass it. The problem is there's no cohesion between these parties. So especially if certain party like Conservatives give it over to Labour, even Conservatives go to Conservatives again and they elect someone else, there's no cohesiveness. So all these things that they set out that they want to try and do, they start, some of them, building the foundations for, and then it goes to nothing. It's like HS2 and everything else. And I think the problem that we got in politics is there's a lack of accountability. We've suffered from a lack of accountability in the UK. Look at utility companies, look at insurance companies, look at all these companies at the minute, even lenders to a degree, and solicitors. Everyone's pulling their hair out with a lot of these people because there's a lack of an accountability.
Well, you just have to look at what's going on with the water, right? So when I was talking about energy a minute ago, we're just talking about energy providers, right? But they're sourcing that energy from abroad. The waterways is within our own country. It's within our own control. And they've polluted and toxified most of it. And their solution is, doesn't matter that our profits are up 30-odd%. We're going to increase everyone's bills to solve the problem that we've created. Complete lack of accountability.
If we were to look at that in terms of the creating new home sphere, because I'm very much probably more in favor of private home builders as opposed to like public home builders.
Yeah, same here.
However, we've also seen that given too much rope, like the privatization when it comes to energy utilities, trains, etc., have also been very inefficient. Like, how do you think we could kind of balance that between getting private home builders to actually build to a good standard and pass that onus on to them? Because I think realistically, it's the way to go, but it's how do you actually do it most efficiently?
So some of the bigger problems, so if you take the fact that it's expensive to build, it's expensive to find land, It's expensive to go through the planning process, even with the funding element behind that. It's difficult. It takes a long time. Delivery becomes an issue. You take that all aside, and then you've got the what's it called, the phosphorus thing, and the, you know, if you want to build somewhere now, you have to nutrient neutrality. That's the stuff. The nutrient neutrality, the phosphorus and the biphosphorus, and all that kind of stuff. So you have to get credits for that if you're building in certain areas near Greenbelt, Brown Belt, or Greyfield. They started calling something Greyfield.
Grey belt. It's green belt that's basically kind of similar to a brownfield, basically.
That's it. It's Labour's rebranding. Same thing they did with their Help to Buy. It's now Freedom to Buy.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget that. Someone earned at least 150 grand off of that. But with regards to the building, so you've got the nutrient neutrality, which is a real issue, because those building materials, all the sluicing goes into the main waterways, and it's problematic. So you have to find a way to actually build sustainably. The problem is we haven't invested in sustainable buildings. You look in the Nordic region, they build very, very sustainably. They use exceptional building qualities and building techniques. The problem here is in the UK that you have funders, banks, institutions that look at that stuff and go, well, don't really want to lend on that. So it then becomes classified as non-standard construction. So what you see is a lot of bureaucracy. You see a lot of things putting restrictions on value and restrictions on delivery to it's not even a trickle down thing. You cannot build to the scale, like you said earlier. Don't worry about building 300, build 100. Tell me where they're going and what impact that's going to have on that local biome. No one's going to do that.
Yeah.
Interesting. What do you guys think about the Reform Party and this kind of far right wins all over Europe? And
can I be the first to dive in on this one?
Go on.
Go, you go for it.
I don't want to be the person that sticks the oar in the wrong place, and there's a chance that I will, right? I think it's going to be a coalition government. I think that Reform are snapping up far too much attention. I think it will be a Labour Reform plus a third, the Conservatives only got in last time on a coalition with the DUP.
Well.
And prior to that, Labour only really got in because they had the Liberal Democrats that went back on all of their policies.
Is it even possible Labour reform government with Labour not just win another election?
Well, if the numbers are close enough, they could call another election. But then you have the issue of how many times you're going to roll the dice before it then becomes a Labour Conservative coalition.
I was going to say, it's going to get to the stage where it is going to become Labour Conservative. I mean, you're seeing everything that's going on. I mean, I don't know if you saw that MP, that Conservative MP that kind of went all the way from like Durham all the way down to London, some random place in London, and then just guaranteed himself a seat. He was like, there's only one person to put themselves forward, and that was me. And you're getting a lot of these where they're kind of trying to place some kind of trickery basically on the system, right?
Well, he's the head of one of the main committees there, right? So in order crescendi, he has to be re-elected in order to stay in his unofficial, unelected position within the party.
Yeah. So I think just taking this back to the property side of things, we need to try and figure out what all of this means, because obviously a lot of people viewing this and want to try and understand what does it mean for property. And I think we discussed this previously, but certainly from my point of view as a trader, it's not really affected me. I mean, the most interesting thing, I had a conversation with one of the agents that brings us quite a lot of stock. I think it was literally yesterday. And he said, he put an offer forward for me. I think we offered 120,000 on something that was marketed at about 180,000, right? So significantly lower. And he said, she's mad not to take your offer. He said, potentially Labour's going to get in. They're going to be building 1.5 million houses. That's going to reduce house prices and all the rest of it. And I just thought, it's probably helping my cause, because you're going to basically try and scaremonger them so you can obviously accept my offer. But just to go to show you, that's an agent that's dealing with vendors. That's the general perception. And that's what people are understanding from their point of view, is they think, house prices might go down with Labour because they're going to build so many houses. They don't dig deep into it and say how are they going to build 1.5 million houses.
I feel like, whilst that may be like with some people, that's, they're kind of got their fingers slightly on the pulse. I feel like a lot of people just are tired. Like they're just drained.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, okay, fine. But like, I'm still going about my day. And I think for myself, for a lot of people, when I have conversations, it's like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and kind of just feel like that's beyond my control. I may vote for a party based on a really specific issue. So for example, for somebody like myself that does a lot of work with planning, I may look at the Conservatives' policy in relation to reforming planning and say, well, that works for me, vote on that basis, not really look at wider policies and just say that either way I have to kind of crack on. I think there is a lot of almost like political burnout when it comes to, I've heard this before, you said this before, nothing's really changed, so let me just kind of focus
Especially
on my
after
microeconomy.
Especially after COVID, right? Like with I think I'm still tired from COVID. The amount of thinking I had to do when COVID hit, because that was the most tangible thing that actually affected businesses, because physically it affected things. You couldn't work in environments where you were physically with people. It affected lenders. It affected, surveyors, everything. So that to me was probably the most tiresome thing to go through. So I think after that, people are kind of like, whatever hits us next, even if it is a black swan event, we'll deal with it. And like you said, which is actually probably the most important point, is look at what happened in Scotland when they tried to do the rent reform. Look at what happened in Wales as well. They're trying to do a U-turn on it because it's massively affected their market. So I think if we just sit as a property investor, if you just sit tight, stay in your own lane, continue doing what you're doing, in theory, you're going to get ups and downs and lots of noise. But if you ignore all of that, you're actually going to be in a really good position, because A, rents are probably going to go up, and B, the values of your house over long term is going to go up anyway. So
I think you touched on COVID, and that I think a great example of that is I used to do a lot of rent to rent in the HMO space, and COVID hit and went from a business that's making sort of £30,000 a month to go at like 95% occupancy, to saying, well, we're being told to socially distance, no one wants to share rooms, half of the retail customer facing trade is gone. They're just literally, it was like people were just handing their keys back and saying, yeah, if it's CCJ, if it's wherever, I'm going back to my mum's. So we went occupancy down to like, I don't know, 65 odd percent, like hemorrhaging sort of almost that same amount a month. But retrospectively speaking, because rents went up so much, like if you held those properties for a long period of time and stayed within the space, your profits doubled. So I think there's always going to be an opportunity. Like when we look at recessions, the most amount of millionaires and the biggest transfer of wealth happens in periods where there's financial uncertainty. So as a property investor, like, yes, you have to look at the property sphere, but more realistically, as an investor, what you are as an entrepreneur, and it's your job to really be able to navigate any changes and see how you can turn threats into opportunities.
And I think times like this, they're mostly the people who lose out the most are the ones that chase shiny pennies. People that continue doing what they were doing and they just slightly adjust their kind of ways of doing things, they probably benefit the most because of the accumulation of like the knowledge and experience and everything else. So
yeah, well, my gut feeling is nothing is actually going to change. If Labour does come in, they're going to spend the first 5 years of their first government fixing everything from the global crash in 2008 all the way up to Brexit, all the way up to COVID, all the way up until now. If they're lucky, it takes them 5 years to bring everything back down to a basis. The last thing the government actually delivered was Brexit. Nothing else has actually been achieved. And actually, 6 years before that, not a great deal was achieved then. And we did a video fairly recently about the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act. They were talking about that since 2011. Things take time.
Yeah, especially when it comes to governments.
In governments. And if it isn't for the infighting or for external issues such as a war in the Middle East, a war in Eastern Europe, a genocide in China, or a genocide in Africa, pick your poison. I don't actually think a great deal is going to change. Sentimentally, something may change. They may start saying they're looking to do X, Y, and Z, but they tried to get the Rwanda bill. Well, an absolute fast and then every time they took it up to laws, it got batted back down again. We're not in an environment where, like we were talking about earlier, there is no deliverability, there is no accountability, there's nothing really like that there. So everything flip-flops and flanders around. And I think it's important, not just as property investors, but as people and investors in general, is to just keep calm, carry on. Watch out for the little dips and dives as they come along. Hold your nerve and fight another day. I think that you just have to be stoic in your approach.
But more importantly, tell us what you guys think. So if you are an investor, drop a comment in below. If you're a developer or a trader as well, I'm really, really interested to see what other people are thinking, what other people are doing, because ultimately that's what it's all about, is just trying to understand what the wider community is doing as well. But yeah, I think you heard it from everyone today. hold your nerve, keep calm, just carry on. The reality is, whatever happens and whatever changes, majority of the time, you're going to be able to kind of continue doing what you're doing as normal. So that's all right.